Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kaler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Okay, welcome back to another episode. And for the third time, we have Vessy a psychoanalyst from Dublin, Ireland, that found her way to Dublin from Bulgaria. Fascinating person and practitioner. And when we left off last time, Vessy, we were talking about paying cash up front before a session. And it was fascinating to me because I had mentioned that I have never heard of a therapist doing that. And the second mental health person I went to was a psychoanalyst. And I think I wrote him a check up front. It was so long ago, I forget. But anyway, welcome back. And let's talk about this. About classic psychoanalysis and the whole theory behind this.
I can't remember what we said in the previous 2 episodes, but I feel like even if we didn't talk about it, I should say it now. Do you know the difference between a psychoanalyst and a psychoanalytic psychotherapist?
I do not.
Okay. So, a psychoanalyst, you see anywhere between 1 to 5 times a week. You could be seeing them every day of the week, pretty much. A psychoanalytic psychotherapist you see once or twice a week. So my training is as a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. I see someone once or twice a week.
That sounds like such a nuanced difference between the two, and yet the words are a psychoanalytic psychotherapist is quite a bit longer. What?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the training is different. You would have different clients, like you would be expected. If I was a psychoanalyst, and I felt I should bring it up because you shortened it, and I get it. It happens sometimes.
I called you a psychoanalyst, right?
Yeah. So if I was a psychoanalyst, I would be seeing some patients 3 times a week, 4 times, 5 times a week. I don't think in Ireland we really have psychoanalysts. I don't think people can afford it. They can barely afford once or twice a week. Maybe that's the reason why we have psychoanalytic psychotherapy. In the UK, they do have psychoanalysts still in this, more kind of intense format where you see your analyst more than 2 times a week. So as part of my training, I was required to go to training analysis, but it was psychoanalytic psychotherapy. So that was twice a week. And I am still attending twice a week, and I would probably attend for twice a week for a good while as well. So there is a requirement for how much personal therapy we should attend in parallel with working with clients and being in supervision and doing all of the kind of like the academic and clinical training that can manifest in various ways.
So it's a requirement in this training of a psychoanalytic analyst that you are getting your own therapy twice a week.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the first session, you're more or less, and this is what happened over the past week, and that's what's on my mind. And it could be much more intense than this tone, right? Whatever is going on for you. And in the second session, you have already gone over kind of the surface level stuff. And it's unavoidable that you go much more in depth. So in a way, I guess when people hear therapy twice a week, they imagine I would have 2 times what I'm having when I go once a week. But you actually have something completely different as an outcome. You're going way more in depth. I would say it's more like threefold or fivefold because you go twice a week. I cannot personally imagine what it would be like to actually be in psychoanalysis 5 times a week. That must be incredibly intense. But back to your question, where we actually started today on the topic of cash. So in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, some practitioners ask to be paid in cash at the end of the session. That is also how I practice psychoanalytic psychotherapy. Um, and that is a more kind of traditional, more orthodox, purist approach, more psychoanalytical approach, if you want. And the reason for that is that money um, plays a key part in the transference countertransference, in the therapeutic alliance between client and therapist. So, maybe a client is forgetting to pay; they forgot to bring cash. Maybe they're offering to overpay. And you could say, oh, they just didn't have the exact amount, so that's why they're offering that extra whatever. Um, mm, Maybe it's during the session that they're trying to renegotiate their fee. Maybe they're complaining how expensive it is. Um, there are cases when people could forget to pay for weeks and weeks. So quite a large amount could be accumulated over time. Now, the meaning of all of those things really depends on the particular client and what is going on in the broader work with this person. So it isn't to say, oh, if they're not paying, you know, the reason is this or something else. And there are also situations where, let's say, the ATM didn't work on their way to therapy. They were going to be late if they tried another couple of ATMs, and they decided to be on time and that they'll pay you next week. Whether that is of importance in the transference and countertransference, it really depends on the specific case. And as Freud said, sometimes the cigar is just a cigar. So there can be a very practical reason, kind of reality based aspect, um, rather than this being extremely important. Maybe they just forgot, or the ATM that always works just doesn't work this way. Or maybe, and there is a bit more going on. Um, it's similar to, let's say, you have a client who comes in and they're upset with their dentist. They're on some unconscious level, they might be also upset with their therapist. But again, we will take all of that. We can only have an interpretation or an insight around it if that makes sense in the broader context, rather than, oh, complain about a dentist equals automatically always 100% complaining against you as a therapist, and that being like an attack on the therapist's capacity or something like that. So the same with money. It could be anything, but what's important here is that it can have meaning, um, and it shouldn't be overlooked. So if I had, let's say, set up a standing order, so once a week, this amount leaves your bank account and it just arrives in mine, then we're losing this opportunity for friction point to have this kind of insight. Now, in the context of Ireland, this is possible because although when people come in for the first time, they expect they will be paying online and they are a bit surprised about cash. It's not too much out of the way for them to just take a note and bring cash every following time. What's interesting is that different things can play out with that. They could think, oh, you're asking for cash because you don't pay your taxes. So then, then where does that fit? What's being played out here? Is it you're taking advantage of them? Are you being dishonest? Are you it's like a power play? Like there are so many things, and it's similar with negotiating the amount. Some people could feel cheated, taken advantage, or they can feel like they're cheating you. They're getting such a good deal. They might try to lie to you when they approach you for the first time and you say, this is my fee, and they say, oh, actually, I was told it's like half that amount. And, then what do you do with that? So money is extremely important, and I love that I can also bring those topics in my supervision. So it isn't just my look at it as a financial therapist thinking about my own relationship with money as an individual, but also as a professional. And in 1913, in one of his papers, Freud was talking about like the beginning of a treatment and how to set things up, like the techniques to start psychoanalysis with a client. And he talks about the time of the sessions and the money aspects. And he very much urges practitioners to treat money matters with the same seriousness um, and matter of course frankness as they would things related to the sexual life of the client. So this is not administrative, you know, back and forth stuff. This is really, really critical.
So what's really striking to me is in psycho, I'm not sure what we're calling this.
Psychoanalytic
Psychotherapy?
psychotherapy.
That is the money the same in psychoanalytics? Is the money treated the same?
I would imagine so. Yeah, they
So
share. The only
it's like,
difference is the frequency.
okay. So the money, the payment for the services is an innate and important part of the whole engagement.
Yeah.
That's just fascinating that I'm going to guess a lot of therapists probably themselves enjoy the fact that the money's paid online, it's automatic, it's taken out of the account, and they don't have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. And which is money avoidance manuscript, if you think about it.
Totally.
And then, so I was talking about the money aspect with my supervisor after a particular interaction with a client, and he recommended this paper by Adam Phillips, who is a psychoanalyst, and the paper is called "The Analyst and the Bribe." And it's part of a collection of papers, many of them around money, not only. That's called "Taboo or Not Taboo," and and it's really interesting to see everything that can kind of play out in this and how different analysts are sharing different experience. In Adam's case, he talks about how an an underage client came in, the father brought him in, and the father said, he's not talking. If you get him to talk, I will pay whatever you want. And that's the bribe, right? And he goes into detail on what's the meaning of that and what it tells you about the environment that this child is growing up and how the father works with money and just everything that's playing out. Um, there is a paper by Katrina Myers who talks about the therapist's desire subjectivity and relationship to the fee. And it's about the money struggles between client and therapist, and essentially how a therapist could be avoiding conflicts related to money, and how that limits the potential success of the therapeutic work. So it can lead to treatment stagnation, it can lead to analytic poverty. Um, but essentially, when a therapist says we need to increase the fee, or you're behind on your fees, the analyst is saying, I have needs, I'm communicating them, and that forces the patient to recognize the therapist as the other, as a separate being from the client. That can be really challenging for some clients. So the client exists, they exist outside of this room, they exist with their own needs, and that means they're not one. The so if the client is at a stage where it feels a bit like infant and mother relationship, and the mother is saying, it's the mother in air quotes, is saying, no, you cannot bite the nipple, or no, you're now growing up, we're working with the separation anxiety. That these are some of the things that can come up with for the client on an unconscious level. However, as challenging as that is, and it can be quite painful for a client and for the therapist, especially if they're avoiding money topics, it also communicates to the client that the therapist believes that the client is capable of working through this. So that can be really empowering. So it's challenging, but it feels it's boundaried and contained while challenging. And when we talk about parenting, this is what good enough parenting is. You're challenging your child while they're still feeling safe. So in the therapeutic alliance, something similar happens when the client increases the fees because of their own needs. The mother needs to go back to work, or the child needs to stay at home with a different caregiver. The child grows up, and it is part of their um, psychological development. It's a new milestone. Now, we're not saying do that 2 sessions in with a client, as the same way you would not typically leave a newborn and just disappear for days. I have been actually thinking of starting a study group specifically on the topic of money for therapists, because so much of it is um is a taboo, even within the community, even talking to each other. um I reached out to a fellow therapist recently, and I said, hey, I'm doing this workshop on financial therapy, we'll be talking money scripts, etc. Do you want to join? and it's a friend therapist, and he said, no, I have, this relative is a bookkeeper. I think I'm not good with money, but this person will teach me. And so it was interesting that I think it was even experienced as intrusive, even though we're peers. um that I was saying, let's talk about money, although it's a workshop, so they're, the participants are not talking to me, essentially, and they don't have to disclose personal things in front of anyone else, unless they want to share. But it was interesting what it brings up in therapists. Now, with another therapist, we were talking about how much people charge and what that's related to. And there are, I would say, markets or communities where people are really particular with the charges. It would be even seen as like immoral or unethical if you're charging more than someone more experienced. And in another market, it would be seen, or community, it would be seen as, oh, that's how you position yourself. That's the demand that you create. So you could set higher prices. Um, or maybe, higher prices for one group of clients allows you to charge lower for a different group of people that
Right.
otherwise won't be able to afford it.
So you mentioned a couple things going back that if a therapist, if I got this right, if a therapist is avoiding the uh, the money, the fee with the client, that it can lead to therapeutic stagnation
Mm-hmm.
or analytic poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that?
Mm-hmm.
First,
And
what is that?
you're getting stuck with, it's kind of like you're reaching a plateau in the therapeutic work. Um, the insights are not developing, or the interpretations they're not even heard. Um, Maybe there is no integration of the insights. It's a bit like, when there is no negative or no positive transference. What's going on? It's a bit. We need something to be happening actively. The therapy needs to be alive. If we're just being two people who are very collegial with each other, and it and there is no development, then we're just keeping each other good company, but that's not therapeutic work.
And tying that back to what's happening with the fee.
Hmm. I
And
think it
what's
increases the chances of plateauing the work. In psychoanalytic work, it can be really unpleasant to, to be in therapy. Unlike maybe other types of therapy that can be a bit more gentle on people.
Mhm.
My experiences with psychodynamic therapy, I don't remember ever leaving infuriated, and maybe there was anger on a more unconscious level. But in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, you get pushed way more, and you get much deeper. I think that's not to say one is better than the other. It's more like, I think when I personally attended psychodynamic psychotherapy, that was the right thing for me. I think that's how much I was able to personally tolerate. And going into psychoanalytic psychotherapy, that was a massive shift in um, what you're being offered, and then what you do with that.
So I'm guessing what a lot of, especially financial therapists do in the U.S. is psychodynamic
Mm.
psychotherapy. I don't think there's too many psychoanalytic psycho.
But if a therapist is asking for testimonials, they are asking to be liked. And that's an issue because in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, massive leaps happen when you hate your therapist. You're actually working through um, much more challenging feelings, and it's really in-depth work. If you stay with the good, fuzzy, warm feelings towards your therapist, and you don't go beyond that. And I'm not saying every therapist should take you there or that every client should be taken there. Um, there is a limitation to how much work can be done. But if we think about it as therapy in a very in the context of capitalism, where you want to be, it's like, do you get a 5-star rating and all of that? No, I think many clients will be really upset with their psychoanalytic psychotherapist or psychoanalyst, because the point is not enjoyment of each other's company. So we wouldn't be doing our work if the point is that every time the client leaves happy and satisfied and kind of affirmed, yes, you were wrong and your partner, well, you were right and your partner was wrong. Like, we don't do that. They would probably just have silence from us, regardless of whether they were right or wrong in a particular argument, that's almost irrelevant.
That is
So that's anxiety provoking for people, hence why
yeah.
they wouldn't be writing positive reviews if they're offered reviews, and why you would not find a psychoanalytic psychotherapist or psychoanalyst on any of the platforms where people can offer rating.
That is so fascinating. I'm guessing that some of our listeners, especially those that are psychodynamic therapists, could be stunned right now.
I don't think so, because psychodynamic therapy and psychoanalytic psychotherapy are very close in many ways. And there are theoretically there are overlaps. Maybe some of them actually practice in a more psychoanalytic way than others among in that community. So I wouldn't say, they would never go into challenging feelings. And my experience with psychoanalytic psychotherapy is both personal and professional, while with psychodynamic it was only as a client. So that is
Okay,
a very important disclaimer here.
sure. So many questions, and I had one just escape me. Do you uh, do financial therapy in a psychoanalytic way, or do you have a different structure when you're doing financial therapy?
It does have a different structure. However, I am influenced by my psychoanalytic training. So I would say there are elements of it, but most of the things that I just mentioned, from the psychoanalytic context, I don't do in financial therapy. For example, all of the payments for financial therapy are online.
Hmm.
It's not part of the work with um, with financial therapy. We work with a fixed rate. It makes sense for Ireland, for Bulgaria. It's also US friendly. I work at €100 per session. I know that we've talked about this before with you, that for the US is probably between 150 to 300 maybe per session for financial therapy. And in Bulgaria, all kinds of therapies would probably range between €30 and €100. Now, for psychoanalytic psychotherapy, I would say in Ireland the range is between 35 and 120, depending on how experienced the person is. Um, Now there is what we call it is a low cost clinic, but we prefer to call it affordable cost clinic. I'm actually still taking some clients from there from time to time, from the Irish Institute of Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy, and there we charge 35 to €50 per session. So there is a sliding scale even within that range. So maybe if someone is unemployed or they're still a student, so they're not able to afford the full fee.
Bessie, this is fascinating. I have a whole bunch of more questions, and we're out of time. It's really fascinating. And one thing I'll just say quickly, what really stuck with me is the 2 sessions a week, that the
Mm,
second session allows you to go deeper. That just really landed with me. It's
mm,
in some of the training I've done, we've done repeating questions.
mm-hmm,
And by about the 5th or 6th or 7th repeating question, you're out of all your preconceived answers,
mm-hmm.
and we'll go deeper. Um, Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us again today. I mean, just some real thought provoking content that you brought out that we could go much deeper on.
Thanks for having me,
And
Rick.
where can people find you, Vessy?
On Vessy.com. So that's Vessy.com. And yeah, I would say that's the go-to place. And from there, I'm on some of the social media, but they can find the links on my website.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for joining me, Rick Kaler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.